I should have bought the same thing for my mother, he thought, but he had already bought her the present the day before. Buying two presents for her would push him over budget, and he could picture his father's face. He abandoned the idea. They arrived at home on the evening of the third day. "I'm back." Kosuke held out the presents he had bought and was about to tell his parents about all the trip when his father poked him. "Stop messing around!" But all he was doing was giving their presents. The thought made him want to cry. His mother had a serious look in her eyes. "Change your clothes. We're going over to Satoru's." Satoru had to leave out early. Had something happened? His mother looked down, searching to how to put it, but his father didn't mince his words. Satoru's parents passed away. Passed away! The words didn't register. Kosuke stood there blankly. "They died!" his father grunted. The moment Kosuke understood, the tears started to flow, as if a dam had been broken. "Stop your blubbering," his father said, poking him again, but the tears wouldn't stop. Satoru, sorry, my God. Kazuki had gone over to Satoru's just the day before they had left for their school trip. He had been playing with Hachi, and Satoru's mother had said, "You have to get up early tomorrow for your school trip, so you'd better get home soon. You're welcome to play with Hachi anytime." Kazuki fell silent. If they had been, it was a car accident. They swerved to avoid a bicycle that came out of nowhere. They missed the bike, but the two of them didn't make it. "Today's the wake. We should go." Kazuki changed the clothes his mother laid out for him, and the three of them set off. Just as they reached the bottom of the slope of the housing complex, Kazuki realized he had forgotten something. "You can get it later." He stood up to his father, telling him they should go on ahead, and finally managed to praise him with the house key. "What an idiot!" He heard his father mutter as he trotted on. The wake was being held at the local community center. A couple of women in black scurried around, and Satoru sat vacantly in front of the two coffins of the altar. "Satoru!" Katsuki called out. Satoru said, nodding, as if his mind was elsewhere. Katsuki had no idea what to say. "Here you go," Katsuki said. He pulled out a thin paper packet out of his pocket. The present he had run to fetch when his father had called him an idiot. "The blotting paper your mother wanted. It's Yojija." Satoru burst into tears. He dropped his head while his small body shook with sobbing. It was only later, when Kazuki had grown up, that he fully understood the meaning of the word lament. A young woman came over quickly to huddle over him. She spoke into Satoru's ear, and the way she was rubbing his back to comfort him, she seemed to know him well. "Are you a friend of Satoru's?" she asked. "Yes, I am," Kazuki said, standing up straight. "Would you take him home so he can have a rest? This is the first time he cried since he got back." Kazuki said he would. The woman's eyes, puffy from crying, broke into a smile. "Thank you," he said. Throughout the funeral, Satoru had sat rigidly next to the young woman. There were other apparent relatives, but they didn't seem so close to him. Many of Satoru's classmates had gone too, to light incense and pray. All the girls sobbed, but Satoru had greeted them without shedding any tears. Himself, Kazuki was impressed how Satoru held up, but at the same time, it felt as his friend had drifted somehow and wasn't really there. If Kazuki were in Satoru's place, if his father would be the one to call him an idiot. His mother had passed away at the same time, and he knew he wouldn't be able to hold it back like that. Kazuki took Satoru by the hand and led him home. On the way, Satoru's words were broken up by tears. "Good luck, Charm, and father came too late. He didn't get a present for Mum, and thank you for buying it." Only Kazuki could have worked out what he was saying. So incoherent with sobs were his words. But when he got to Satoru's house, Hachi was waiting on that day's newsletter near the front door. He seemed unfazed when he got to Satoru's account. Hachi was waiting on that day's newspaper at the front door, and he seemed unfazed by Satoru's crying like an animal and padded towards the living room as if guiding them. When Satoru collapsed on the sofa, Hachi jumped up on his lap and licked Satoru's hand over and over. When they had found Hachi, he had only been a kitten, but now he seemed more grown up than Satoru. At the funeral, Satoru didn't come back to school. Every day, Kazuki would take the homework back to his house, and they would play silently with Hachi for a while. And they and then Kazuki would go home. The young woman stayed next to Satoru the whole time, for a while, for the entire time, and it turned out she was Satoru's aunt, her mother's younger sister. Is he gonna live with her? Kazuki wondered. He would drop in on Satoru even on days when there were no homework to deliver. His aunt knew his name, greeting him with a "hello, Kazuki," whenever he came by. She was quieter than Satoru's gregarious mother in the house that now felt strange to him. "I'm gonna move," Satoru said one day. His aunt was gonna be Satoru's guardian, but she lived a long way. Ever since Satoru hadn't come back to school, Kazuki had an inkling that this might happen. But it did feel as if a hole had opened up in his heart. He knew that the whining about it wasn't going to change anything, and he stroked Hachi as he laid curled up on Satoru's lap, without saying a word. Today, too, Hachi was gently licking Satoru's hand. "But Hachi will go with you, won't he? That way Satoru wouldn't be so lonely." But Satoru shook his head. "I can't take Hachi. My aunt moves around a lot with work." And Satoru, too, looked like he was whining about it was going to change anything. But it was too much to bear, Kazuki thought. "Do you know them well?" Satoru shook his head. This made Kazuki angry. How could Hachi be taken in by people Satoru didn't even know? I'll ask if we can have Hachi at our plate. I'll plate. Hachi had been looked after by Kazuki half of the time anyway. He could take care of Hachi, and Satoru would come to his place to see him. Even his father had shown an interest in Hachi whenever he visited, but his father's view hadn't changed a bit. No way! A cat? Are you kidding? But Satoru's mom and dad are dead, and now if Hachi has to stay with people he doesn't even know, think how sad he'll feel. He knows them. They're relatives. Satoru says he doesn't even know them. Distant relatives are people you hardly see, to a child, like total strangers. Friends are much closer. Why don't adults understand that? Any case, it wouldn't work. Cats live 10 or 20 years sometimes. Do you want to take in responsibility for your entire life? Yes. That's pretty cheeky for someone who's never earned a penny in their life. His mother, perhaps thinking things were getting out of hand, stepped on Kazuki's side, but his father still wouldn't budge. "I feel sorry for Satoru," his father went on, "but these are two different things. Go and tell him you can't do it." There was no way a sixth grade boy was gonna make him change his mind, so Kazuki headed towards Satoru's, crying fat tears the whole way, and his leg felt like lead as he climbed up the slope from the bottom of the housing complex. When they had first found Hachi, Satoru had gotten everything he possibly could to enable Kazuki to have him. His attempts had been misguided, and he had given his all, and had done his very best. And the upshot was that Hachi had gone to live in Satoru's house. "I'm so sorry," Kazuki said, still crying. "My dad said I can't have him." "Damn you, Dad. Don't you see what Satoru means to your son?" "It's okay." On the day Satoru moved, Kazuki was there to see him off. Unbelievably, Kazuki's father came with him. "Of course I'm moving. Of course I'm coming," his father had said, "since we know Satoru so well." Seeing his best friend move away, Kazuki had never felt such a deep contempt for his father. At first, the boys exchanged letters and phone calls frequently, but as the days passed, the calls and letters naturally became less regular. One reason for this was Kazuki's shame of having shirked his duty towards his friend and not taking in Hachi. If they had been able to see each other from time to time, the closeness would have eased his sense of awkwardness. But they were not able to meet. Time only made his feelings of guilt grow. However, they never stopped sending each other New Year other New Year cards. These always included brief notes saying that they should get together sometime and that they continue high school or into college. But intervening years in which they hadn't seen each other made it all the harder to arrange to meet again. On the Adults' Day ceremony, Kazuki's old classmates were reunited to celebrate their turning 20. Many who now lived outside the prefecture came back especially. But it wasn't long. But it wasn't Satoru who was among them. Where he was attending his adult day ceremony, Kazuki wondered. Kazuki and his classmates must have fun at the ceremony, because afterwards, for a little while at least, they continued to get together on various occasions. It was a bit soon for a high school and for a high school reunion, but just the right time to ask nostalgic occasions. It was still a bit but in junior and high school days. Kosuke, who had still lived in the prefecture, was still in charge of organizing the elementary school reunion. It was decided that all his sixth grade classmates should be invited. As he was in charge, he decided to send an invitation to Satoru. Satoru phoned in reply. His voice had not changed, and though they hadn't talked in years. Their conversation was as lively as if no time had passed. Satoru rattled on as making up for all the years of silence. Fun talking to you again. Well, see you, Satoru said and hung up. Moments later, he was called again. He had forgotten to mention the class reunion, and of course he would come. After this, he kept in touch more regularly, and Satoru was living in Tokyo, and now they were adults distance. That wasn't so much of an obstacle. Satoru graduated from a college in Tokyo and got a job in this city. Kosuke graduated from a nearby college and found a local job locally. It was 3 years now that Kosuke had taken over his father's photographic studio. Even after Kosuke had grown up, he and his father still didn't get on. When his father's health failed, he shut up shop and moved onto the countryside a short distance away. He was from a family of local landowners, so he had various plots of land in the area. For a time, his father kept the photo studio closed, but after a while, keeping it at all seemed like too much trouble, so he decided to sell it off. He often announced his intentions to do this, but it made Katsuki a bit sad. He had been around photos ever since he was a child, and his father, hot-tempered and overbearing most of the time, became cheerful and kind when teaching him about photography. Once he even got him an old camera. Kasuki had picked up a lot about photography, or at least his father's version of it, and when he was older he had helped out occasionally with the photo sessions in the studio. It was only through photography that his and father had got along, which meant now their connection with photography had ended. Their relationship could only get worse. Kasuki couldn't bear that, and he talked things over with his wife and urged on, too, by the fact that his own job wasn't going well. He told his father not to sell off the studio, but to let him take it over. His father was unexpectedly overjoyed, and nearly burst into tears. Ah, even this late in the game, he knew this was gonna mark a change for the better. At least, that's what I thought. Kasuki almost spat out the words. Did you two have a bad argument or something? Satoru asked anxiously. What with my father being so arrogant and selfish? Maybe I shouldn't have tried so hard to be a good son. He had opened the photo studio, and his father still interfered, turning up and meddling. He'd give his opinions on how to run this place and what the directions of the business should go in, and generally boss Kazuki around. On top of this, he'd make inappropriate remarks to Kazuki's wife. You better have a child soon, so there would be someone to take over the studio, he told her. Kazuki and his wife were having trouble conceiving, and this was causing them a lot of stress. Kazuki's mother would sometimes warn her husband to watch his tongue, but hearing candid advice from his wife only made him more obstinate, a condition he seemed to never outgrow. Finally, Kazuki's wife conceived a child that had been there that year, but during the first trimester of pregnancy, when things were touch and go, she had a miscarriage. His wife was deeply upset, and she found the words of his father spoken in an attempt to comfort her extremely hurtful. Well, he said. he had said. At least we know you can have children. Katsuki was incensed. Why is this man my father? I don't know how many times I've child I've felt this way about him, ever since the day he rejected Hachi. After that, my wife went back to her parents' place. Her parents, naturally, were furious. Yeah, I even tried to apologize, but they didn't want to listen. Young women these days are all so touchy, was all he'd say. Sometimes I just wished he would drop this. Did, and he quickly apologized. Sorry about that, he added. Perhaps he had inherited this insensitivity from his father's idea. Don't worry about it, Satoru said, smiling. They're all kind of parent-child relationships. I never wanted my parents to die, but if I had other parents, I don't know how I would have felt. If your father had been my father, Kazuki, I don't know if I would have been able to love him. He burst out laughing. Some people shouldn't become parents. There's no absolute guarantee when it comes to love between a parent and a child. This one's unexpected, coming from Satoru. I hope your wife comes back soon. I don't know. It's not just her father-in-law she's upset with. She must be disgusted with her husband, who had never been able to stand up to his father. Kosuke had a bit of habit of swallowing whatever he wanted to say. Repeated patterns of childhood behavior had long-term consequences. All Kosuke would ever did was mumble ineffectually about the ridiculous things his father had handed on a tone of his. Does your father really meddle that much? And we don't have many customers these days, either. People weren't going to photographic studios on special occasions like they used to. It was all the part of the changing times, but Kazuki blamed it on the son. He thought he was spineless. And still, Kazuki could never bring himself to stand up on the father and argue back. Me, on the other hand, I'm not like that. If things aren't good, I have no problem saying so, because cats are the creatures that can say no. And the idea of being taken into the home of the man because he hoped that his wife, who liked cats, would be tempted back? I swear, with all the feline dignity I can muster, this is a definite no for me. I wonder if Nana finally got used to it here. Kazuki stood up from the sofa and knelt in my basket, placing his hand gently on top. Just try it. Try pulling me out of the force of my basket. I swear, I'll scratch you so many lines on your face you'll be able to play checkers on it for the next 3 months. Chi chi chi. Kazuki made friendly little sounds and stuck his hand into the basket. I hissed and bared my teeth. Yep, that's off limit. Cross that line, and believe me, you'll live to regret it. He still doesn't seem to want to come out. Kazuki withdrew his hand. Doesn't seem like it's gonna work. You know, Satoru said hesitantly, if you're gonna cat, maybe it's better if you and your wife find a new one together. What do you mean? If you take my cat, it'll be like you're just getting back at your father for this. I'm sure he doesn't remember rejecting Hachi, but you do. At this, Kazuki fell silent. No, I'm not denying that Kazuki wants to take care of their friendship. I mean, I won't deny either that taking me, with my resemblance to Hachi, would have something to do with the goats of the past. Neither I maintaining with nothing to do with his life because he left that different strings attached. I think it would be good for you if your you and your wife got a new cat with no strings attached. Uh, Kazuki pouted like a child. I love Hachi. I really wanted to adopt him back then. But they look so similar. But Nana's his own cat. He's not Hachi. But you felt it was fate when you met Nana, because he looked like Hachi, didn't you? If you were fated to have Nana, then it should be my fate too. Jeez, humans. Even when they grow up to just don't get things, makes me sick. My Hachi died back when I was high school. Your Hachi, Kosugi, is still alive. That's right. Satoru, in his mind, already laid Hachi to rest and move on, so Hachi's place and my place were different. But that's not true of you, is it, Kosugi? You know that in your head that Hachi's dead, but you emotionally can accept it, right? If you don't mourn the dead cat properly, you'll never get over it. Even if feel to mourn the death of the cat you've heard nothing about for years, it's a little late to feel truly sad about it, isn't it? On one other thing, you want to place Hachi, Kosugi, up until now. Satoru has loved me as Nana, but you expecting to be Hachi's stand-in? Not going to happen. And even worse is this troublesome father and wounded wife added to the mix. I'm exceptionally wise cat. But there is no way I'm going to be part of that drama. Burdened with all those depressing human relationships as they fondle me is more than I want to take on. You and your wife should find a new cat and make him your own. Leave your father out of it. He might complain. Just ignore him and get a cat, if that's what you want to do. Katsuki didn't reply, but he looked like he finally understood. So when he stuck his hand inside the basket again, I allowed him to stroke me as a kind of farewell gift. It's about time you cut the strings and got over your father. Cats, are independent from their parents 6 months after they're born. Satoru put me and my basket into the silver van. He stood on the pavement talking with Katsuki. He seemed reluctant to say goodbye. "Oh, by the way," Satoru said, slapping his forehead as if remembering. "In the city, they photographic studios that take photos of pets, and they're really popular. There's more people than you think who would want to have cute photos of their pets." Katsuki seemed quite keen on the idea. "Have you ever taken professional photos of Nana?" Satoru smiled mischievously. "Not yet, but if the Sawada photo studio becomes a pet studio, then maybe I will." Katsuki broke into a smile. "It'd be fun to hurl a new business idea to my father's face, too." Satoru was now in the van. He wounded down the window. "One more thing," he said to Katsuki. "When I was 20, you invited me to that class reunion, remember? Oh, that old story. It made me so happy." "Why are you bringing up that now? 'Cause I don't think I ever told you how happy it made me." "Oh, stop," Kazuki said, trying to save the subject. "I won't," Satoru said jokingly. "Thank you. I never thought I'd get the chance to come back to this town." Satoru finally drove off. "Sorry, Nana," Satoru said, turning towards me in the back seat. "I thought it's better for him to get his own cat than to take you. But I'll find someone to have you, someone I can trust completely." "No worries. I mean, I didn't ask you to do this in the first place. If you had forced me to stay there, things would have been pretty terrible for you and Kazuki, you know that. I mean, by the half of year's worth, perhaps, on the checkerboards of your face." Satoru glanced at me in the back seat. Now I was sitting in a tidy bowl, my tail around my front legs. He let out a yelp. "Nana, how'd you get out?" "Didn't you know? That lock on the basket doesn't work very well, and it's easy peasy to unlock it from the inside." "You can open it? I had no idea. I'll have to buy a new one." "You can find out I can open any basket, and that's all you can say?" "Even that day when you took me to one place I never ever wanted to go, the vets. I didn't try to run away." On a second thought, maybe there's no need. Even if you'd known how to get all along, you'd still listen to me. Exactly. It's true you should be thankful that I'm such an exceptionally bright cat. I stretched up, placing my paw on the passenger window, and enjoyed the passing scenery for a while, and then curled up on the seat. Some kind of rock music was playing on the car radio, and the bass sound vibrated in my stomach. Not exactly my thing. Cats have their own preference to when it comes to music. Did you know that? I pressed my ears down and waved my tail in an attempt to make my feelings known to Sortu. It didn't take him long to understand. "Oh, I see. You don't like this. What's on the stereo, I wonder?" Sortu switched in his car stereo, and a light orchestral melody started playing. "Okay, this wasn't so bad. My mother used to like this. Paul Marat. Not bad at all. I could picture Doze about to fly off. Happy vision from a feline perspective." "I never know you like cars so much, Nana. If I'd known, I would have taken you to all kinds of places." "Saying I like cars is a little inaccurate. Aren't you forgetting that time a car broke my leg? I just like the silver van, that's all. Because it was mine even before I met Satoru." "Okay, so whose place are you going to take me to next?" After Katsuki had waved a hand off Satoru and Nana, he went back inside, and he went and found a text on his phone. It was from his wife. "Did you check the cat?" He was about to reply, but he decided to call instead. He had a feeling that this time she might answer. The phone rang 7 times, Nana's lucky 7. "Hello?" His wife's tone flat and a little distant. It was now up to Kazuki to truthfully, delicately, and soften that hard tone. "I was thinking," he said evenly, "what about if the two of us got our own new cat?